we'll be discussing a pretty basic, it seems like a basic topic in the Zionist thought. The topic being who was Theodore Herzl. Theodore Herzl, we know, was let's put it this way: he's known as the founder of modern Zionism. Okay, that's the founding father of modern Zionism, you could say, largely credited with the idea of Zionism and starting Zionism. So that's who he was. But I want to show you a quote. Okay, and this for those watching on Facebook, you'll see the quote. And those watching Instagram, just say the quote out loud. You're not going to believe that this was recited by Theodore Herzl. Okay, listen to this quote. He says, "The Jews have nothing to do anymore with the historic homeland. If the Jews were ever really to return, they would discover the very next morning that they had long ago ceased to be one people. For centuries, they have been rooted in diverse nationalities, different from one another, their similarities maintained only as a result of outside pressure." I think very few people would assume that was something that Theodore Herzl, the founder of Zionism, would have stated and would have said. That sounds pretty much unbelievable that could be him. Really just incredible. The lack of belief in the fact that there would be a Jewish state, and the lack of enthusiasm for a Jewish state, and the complete negation of the idea that there was a Jewish people. And his whole idea, he thought at his time that the whole idea of a Jewish people was essentially merely the fact that there was outside pressure. It means that Jews, given their choice, would not have identified as the Jewish people. Instead, what they're doing is, which is amazing, is this idea that they should be, that it's just because of anti-Semitism that's drawing them together. As that people are coming to them and saying, we hate you, and therefore we find similarities because we're all hated together. But there's no real concept of the Jewish people. Zionism itself is built on the idea that there's such a thing as the Jewish people and that they have a right to their own homeland. So the idea that there would be a Jewish people without peoplehood, it's ludicrous, completely ludicrous. So that's early Theodore Herzl, okay, and Theodore Herzl early in life ridiculing this concept of a Jewish people and the idea of a Jewish state. Now, if that's Theodore Herzl younger, and Theodore Herzl did not live a long life. There wasn't that much time for him to evolve as a thinker. He died at 44. So Theodore Herzl had to have gone up under a major change in order to go from this mocking of a concept of the Jewish people, doubt in the Jewish state, not seeing really a purpose in having a Jewish state, to go to the other extreme and become the founder of modern Zionism. It's solely predicated on the idea that there's a Jewish people that have rights, one of those rights being to their own homeland. So that's a fascinating thing. So if you reread Herzl's objection, if we look at it again and look at it more carefully, we see that Herzl, who in our minds, essentially what's happening with Herzl when we see Herzl, we don't have video of Herzl speaking. We have words that he wrote. We have transcribed speeches that he gave. But Herzl, for the most part, is like this figure in Jewish history and Israeli history that's out there, but isn't really well known. We don't really know a Herzl. We don't have the same sense of today's leaders when we see a leader today. So we hear their voice, we see their facial expressions, we connect with them, even with our eyes closed. When we hear them, we hear their voice on the radio or on a clip. We know exactly who they are. We're familiar with them. There's no familiarity really with Herzl as the person. That's the incredible thing. There's really just there's no familiarity with who he is. And that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to in this lecture a short lecture, I'd like to try to figure out who he was. Now, Herzl in his lifetime experienced both praise and vilification from the Jewish people. Right, there were people that felt that he was undermining all of Judaism with his Zionist movement, and there are those that felt that he was nothing short of a almost like a Messiah-like prophet who would come to save the Jewish people after 2,000 years of exile. Right, so I just want to read you a quote that Dr. Gil Troy brought in his books. This is from a delegate in Odessa, Russia. His name was Mordechai Ben Ami. And he discussed Herzl getting up to speak at the first Zionist Congress. And this is what he said. He said, before us rose a noble, almost angelic figure, whose deep and piercing stare mixed quiet majesty with intolerable sorrow. This was not the elegant Dr. Herzl of Vienna, but a royal scorn of the house of David, risen suddenly from the grave in all his legendary glory. Those people there were enamored with him at these congresses. They saw like a Messiah-like figure who had come from King David's line of people to come save the Jewish people. That's who they saw Herzl was, which is a pretty incredible thing to look at Herzl as such an incredible figure. And the question is does he in the annals of history, when we look back at Herzl, does he really live up to this description? Was he really that great? Many times Herzl is compared to Moses, right? And there were a lot of similarities between them, right? Both of them obviously spent their good portion of their lives pushing the Jewish people back to Israel. But they themselves, tragic figures, did not make it across that border, did not make it into Israel themselves. Both set, even though they themselves didn't participate in it, both set the foundations up of a Jewish commonwealth, okay, and again, unable to witness its achievement, right? And but as many times as you can see similarities between Herzl and Moshe, right? There's a huge difference in them, in that Moshe was working from a Torah perspective, working from a religious perspective, seeing that he was fulfilling God's destiny by bringing the Jewish people back to Israel. The Herzl, right, wasn't Torah observant. He didn't see this as a religious notion. He saw Zionism and bringing the Jewish people as a means to ensure that the Jewish people survived. The rising anti-Semitism at the time terrified Herzl. He didn't know, again, that there was going to be a Holocaust, but he predicted something horrible happening to European Jewry, and knew that the only way they'd be safe is if they came back to Israel. Okay, so right, and then so again, the question that Gil just asked here is well, hold on a second. If he's such a great person, if he's just like Moshe, why did so many people reject him? Right, and it's not, by the way, it's not a small amount of people, and it's not just one Jewish community. It wasn't like just the non-religious rejected him or just the religious rejected him. 95% of world Jewry, from the smallest the farmer to the wealthiest leader, all rejected Herzl. 95% of world Jewry looked at Herzl and said, Zionism is a very bad idea. We should not go forward. We're not going to support you. Okay, so right, so now one other difference between Herzl and Moshe, right, as we're comparing them, and we see why so many Jews rejected Herzl, is this idea that they both were reluctant to take on their roles, but Moshe was reluctant because he felt that Moshe felt he himself wasn't worthy of leading the Jewish people. He didn't feel that he was a bit of the ability. He doubted himself. While Herzl, as we saw in the quote, doubted the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. Okay, so there really is there is something in common between Herzl and Moshe, but really very little in common between them, other than what looks like on paper to see that they both led the Jewish people up to Israel. I didn't bring them in themselves, but really not much of a similarity between them. So where do we find that this love affair, this adoration of Herzl? Where does it come from? Is it really deserved? And if we look through a lot of Herzl's writings, okay, if we look through a lot of Herzl's writings, we'll see a lot of his ideas are to be charitable. We'll call them not workable. There were a lot of them were crazy. His first idea to save the Jewish people was to have all the Jewish people convert to Christianity, in which case the Christians would come and love them. Not only is this a horrific idea in terms of Jewish peoplehood, which we saw early in life, Herzl didn't really believe in anyway, but it's also a horrible idea practically. Let's forget about all the facts that we want to keep the Jewish people alive. But if you literally just talking about what's a survival strategy, what's something that we could do that'll allow us to survive, well, we saw that when push came to shove and the non-Jews wanted to wipe us out, they did not accept the conversions. If you had Jewish blood, you had Jewish blood. It made no difference if you converted to a different religion. Okay, so those are just Herzl had these ideas of trading houses, global like real estate company that would sell your house in Russia and then give you a house in Israel. So many of his ideas you look at and you just say, this can't work. This could not be right. Okay, so that's what we find with Herzl. And again, begs the question, why do we admire this man so much? Why do we look at him as a sort of the George Washington of the state of Israel, when reality is he didn't do much and his ideas were not that captivating. So not only that, Herzl wasn't even the first person to come up with Zionism. Even the phrase Zionism wasn't his. Okay, so and if you look at Herzl, he did not galvanize the people. You look at Herzl, you say, oh, well, beforehand, nobody was really moving to Israel. Well, and then all of a sudden, within 100 years of Herzl's lifetime, we've got 9 million people living in Israel. That's the result of Herzl galvanizing the people and creating a movement that they start mass coming to Israel. But that's not even true. He didn't galvanize the people during his time. He was mostly rejected during his lifetime, and you had groups of the Jewish community, both on the right of the religious perspective and the left of the secular perspective, who did not want at all to follow Herzl. They thought that Zionism was a horrible idea. They thought Herzl was a horrible idea. So this is So again, with all this criticism coming at Herzl, you have to ask, what was it? What's the reason that we put Herzl on such a pedestal, that we think that Herzl was so great? What is it about Herzl that draws the Jewish people, that we hang his picture in our state places? We have such a great looking up at Herzl and see him as this hero of the Jewish people. Why? Okay, so we see that for 2,000 years, there's 3 things I want to talk about that Herzl contributed to the Jewish people, and I think that's I know I've been negative this entire lecture, but I think that these 3 things shows you why we should admire Herzl. Okay, so the first thing is that for 2,000 years, the Jewish people were not connected to each other. Most Jewish people were aware of the Jews in their town, right, in their location, but past those immediate borders, right, we didn't even know there was such a thing as Ethiopian Jewry. But Yemenite Jewry had no idea of Russian Jewry, and Jews in Iraq did not know that there were Jews in the United States of America. Right? The Jews were essentially worried about where they were. Okay, so that's the first thing. What Herzl did was Herzl was able to transform people's thoughts from their immediate local community to thinking for the first time as the Jewish people as an entire nation, and therefore, if there are Jews elsewhere in the world, if there's a community of Jews in Ethiopia, and I live in Russia, I should be worried about them. And we should take all those people and gather them together as a nation in one location. Okay, but that wasn't his only laudable achievement. Okay, so for thousands of years, Jews looked at Israel and the return to Israel as sort of like a messianic fairy tale, an Agadata, it wasn't a realistic place to move and to make home. Okay, so now what Herzl did was he said, let's take a practical approach to Zionism. Let's outline the steps that we need to take, the political successes and victories that we need to have in order to make a state, and let's start making Eretz Yisrael not just a destination of the future of some messianic fairy tale, but rather let's make it a practical step that we could take now and come back to Israel. So that was the second, sort of mind change that Herzl was able to do, was this ability to transform the Jewish mindset from one of Eretz Yisrael, going back to Eretz Yisrael, something that happens at some unknown future date with the Messiah, and instead have people start thinking about practically, okay, you know what, this could happen today, and we don't have to wait for a Messiah. Lastly, right, so the Zionism, right, what Herzl brought, didn't only benefit the Jewish people, it helped the world because of the future contributions that the state of Israel, the Israeli people, and Jewish people would make to the world. Zionism allowed the Jewish people the free thought to be able to do that, to be able to advance. And we see over the last 75 years of Israel's existence that they've really lived up to that and had the ability to bring all of the benefits of an Israeli state, of a Jewish state, to the rest of the world. So yes, it's true. Herzl was not the perfect person. Herzl was not a perfect leader, not a perfect Jew for sure. But all of those things, not being perfect, doesn't mean you don't deserve the people's admiration. We look at the positive things that Herzl was able to accomplish. The three contributions that I listed. The first being that Herzl got the nation to start thinking about each other from around the world. Second, that started to think about Eretz Yisrael as not just a messianic destination, but the destiny of the Jewish people today, and they're able to do it, right? And lastly, for the world to benefit from Zionism, for the world to benefit as they have from the contributions of the state of Israel. And as you say, correct, I don't know who it is online here, because it's a lot of different letters that must, I'm sure, stand for something, but says that no one is perfect, and that is 100% true. No one is perfect. So a lot of people might say that Herzl, wasn't the perfect leader. They might say that he was no Moses or King David, but at the same time, we do understand why for 2,000 years we waited and waited and waited, and yet. Khalid, thank you, Khalid. So and yet at the same time, you do not have for 2,000 years anybody able to bring the Jewish people back to Israel. So whatever side you fall on, the Herzl admiration side or non-admiration side, at least we can understand why Herzl is admired by so many, especially the founders of the state of Israel. Okay, that's today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join us next week for other lectures as well.